Good morning. Hopefully you all can hear me really well. My name is Dave Shields, and before I get started, I want to apologize in advance. For some reason, I had some throat stuff going on, so my voice is not as powerful as it normally is. Normally, my voice is to the point where I wouldn't even need a mic sometimes. So I apologize. Hopefully, it won't be too much of a problem. I'm going to be drinking a whole lot of water to get this going. Well, I want to welcome you guys to day 2, or day 3, I guess, of our conference. Really excited about this. I am here to present to you guys about the 8 pitfalls of a next generation identity access management program. And this is something that was, it's a piece of the information I've presented at some other conferences, but although the information I'm going to present to you is something that comes more out of a higher education background, because that is where I come from, the information I have here will be useful for virtually any identity access management program, regardless of what vertical you happen to belong to. So I will do my best to try to avoid as much of the higher ed speak as I can. We are kind of have our own little lingo. But in any case, I want to go ahead and get ourselves started. First and foremost, give the sort of obligatory about OU. I think this will give you guys a good idea of understanding sort of the context in which this particular presentation, the information, is going to appear in. So the information to tell you about, first of all, is that OU, it is a publicly funded research institution in Oklahoma. So what that means in English is we're considered part of the Oklahoma government. And so I'm considered a state employee, and we are funded by state money as well as grants, things like that. And we are also doing a whole lot of research. We do a lot of grants and things for that. We have approximately 37,000 students, and this is the number of students that you would estimate if you're talking about students from strictly in-class standard enrollment type of things. If you want to include the online students, the continuing education students, and some of our special programs, the number would be much higher than that. But by and large, we say about 37,000 students. And to operate an institution that large, you need a lot of people. So we have about 12,000 people who are serving in faculty and staff positions, some doing both in the university. We also are spread across 3 different campuses. We have the primary campus in Norman, which is a suburb of Oklahoma City metro area. It's the place where the Gaylor Memorial Stadium is. Boomer Sooner, gotta say it or I'll lose my information. It also have the OUHSC, which is our health and sciences center. It's a teaching hospital that's in right near the capital area of Oklahoma City. And then we also have our OU Tulsa division, which Tulsa is another, the next other large metro area in the Oklahoma state. So there's a good idea of all the measure in here. So as you can guess, in an environment like this, it's pretty decentralized. We have a lot of problems with what you would call shadow IT. We have a lot of problems with just everyone kind of runs their own shop. HSC and Norman are the same university, but ne'er shall they meet sometimes, and it's an interesting environment. So that hopefully gives you guys a little bit of context to kind of paint around what I'm going to talk about. Also, I want to mention that I'm very proud to be able to be coming here with the guest of the IDMWorks company here. It's got Paul and a couple other guys in the back there, the great guys. We did a number of projects with the IDMWorks team. They've been a great partner, and so a little bit more information about them. I do not know enough about that information to go over it with you, but I'm sure if you ask Paul, he'll be happy to give you all the details about that. But IDMWorks is one of the partners that the university has chosen to partner with. It's been a great relationship, I think, so far. So. Now, before we go into the material, I'm going to start and give you guys all a reality check, right? And don't tell me your reality check bounced. Sorry, I don't play that way. What does that mean? Well, again, I'm trying to set you some context to understand what's happening. So if you're building an identity and access management system, just because you build it does not mean they shall come. I promise you that I thought I heard the voices telling me if I build it, they'll come, and I thought it'd be great, and it hasn't always worked out that way. Another thing that is a reality in any kind of identity access management system you make or build or manage is that it has old processes in it. Sometimes the systems actually develop their own ecosystem of processes, and those can be bad. Those can be garbage. There can be a lot of problems with those, and those old processes, no matter how bad they may be, they die very hard. A lot of people don't want to let go of that, especially in a higher ed environment or an environment with a long history. But also, new processes die easy. So if you build anything, including an identity management system, if the process that you have to make your people follow is not as good or as quick or in their minds as easy as the original process, they're going to do their best to avoid that process. So I wanted to train you guys to learn to see some of the pitfalls that you may experience whenever you're either creating an identity management system from scratch, maybe you're rebuilding the one that's existing in your organization, maybe you're being tasked to maintain something that's been around for a very long time. But in any case, I'm trying to give you a couple of the things or pitfalls that we found in this process. And it's been about almost a 2.5-year process at the university. I was brought in around March of 2015. And pretty much launched headlong into building identity management to replace the existing system that was already in place. It was an old legacy system many years ago. And for some reason, use excerpts to provide you resources and help is a useful thing. For some reason, that didn't get updated on the slide deck. So anyway, now let's go to the actual pitfalls and what exactly we're talking about. The very first pitfall that I want to address when it comes to building an identity management system is bad planning. We've had a bunch of different conversations at this conference and other conferences about how planning is critical, how planning is very urgent, and you must do those things, and no matter how good the plans are, they still aren't going to work all the time. But a bad planning kills new ideas. There's no way of proving that your system works if it's planned improperly. You may have the greatest system that you've designed, it's engineered, everything looks perfect, but the problem is it wasn't planned effectively, and that brings up any number of issues, and that can cause a lot of problems, especially in adopting a new system or getting the follow-up and the backing of the people who you need to get. Another thing that I say is that just because you can buy an identity management system does not mean you should. I came from an environment prior to the university where I worked in government contracting. And in that world, there was this bizarre situation I never experienced in any other environment where people would actually say, hey, we need to buy a bunch of equipment in the next 6 weeks because our project's about to be done and we want to show them that we used all the funding and what can we buy with that money? And I don't necessarily know if that happens in organizations nowadays or in your organizations, but it is something that I've experienced. So just because you can buy an identity management system, maybe that's you got a guy who went to a CIS conference and said, man, I heard a lot about this IAM stuff. I want to make something, let's go buy it. Don't necessarily mean you should do that, especially not the right thing. And the main reason for that is because your identity management system touches too many things. Identity management is the core of any organization, and it cannot live in a vacuum. It cannot live in a bubble. If identity management is considered, built, and orchestrated inside a bubble, it is not going to succeed. Okay, so I've given you some doom and gloom. How do you fix some things? Well, the solution we found at the university was to do a roundtable. Now, this is not roundtable where you have knights showing up in armor and King Arthur and all that, or Camelot. But it's a roundtable, meaning everyone has an equal standing, and we do meet around a table, although they're usually square. So what is that for? Well, what we do is you want to get at least one person who is full-time to do your identity management system if you can. That was me in this case, and since then I've been lucky enough to be able to get more people to join, to be part of that. But you have at least one person, because if you have a person who does one job here, one job there, and identity management is just sort of a part of what they do, there's a good chance that they're not going to be able to succeed as well as they would have liked to. And I suggest that you do a very democratic approach. Create a think tank. Create people who all have a stake in your identity management system. Sometimes I call them roundtable members. Sometimes I call them data stakeholders, IAM stakeholders. In any case, people who have at least some reason to be a part of this initiative you're doing. Your roundtable will help you make those plans succeed, because not only do these people know their particular section of the organization really well, but probably a lot of them have been there and have seen some of the bad, the good, good, the bad, the ugly, and they'll be able to help with that and help you get those to go. And I also suggest that when you're looking at who to put on that roundtable, don't just think of higher level executives and management types and all that. Those are all good and well, but sometimes what you'll find is the ones who have the tribal knowledge, the ones who've been here for the longest, who've been here since they created this weird identity management thing in 1996, those people are going to have a whole lot of knowledge, a whole lot of skills, and probably they'll be able to tell you what happened last time you tried to do this and if it did or didn't work. So those are very important people to have on that roundtable. So to give you a little bit of a snapshot of the roundtable at OU, what we created. It meets every other week, and we also have meetings that occur, messages and things where we communicate on email and other things to kind of discuss topics. The thing that's really interesting and different is that we allow the roundtable meetings to be open to anyone at the university who's interested. And some people may say, oh my gosh, I don't necessarily know if I want a strange person entering my meeting. Trust me, no one wants to go to a meeting if they don't have to. So if a person is allowed to come to a meeting, there's a reason they want to go there. And you'd be amazed at the number of things we've learned by just allowing people to come in. And what also happens is when you have this round table with all these experts there, the people can ask their question, and maybe if you, as the person running that identity management program, don't know the exact specification of that answer, I bet you the person that's at the round table does, at least if you picked them right. And so the person that asked that other question, you can say, oh, well, that might be a better question for my friend John over here. He'll be able to help you with that particular piece, and so on. And it also makes it where you're being open. You're not creating walls. You're not saying, hey, get out of here. This is my space. What are you doing? You know, this is something that touches everything. You have to be able to work with everybody. And my roundtable consists of a lot of people that are in different areas. We have enterprise architects, which are great guys. They've been around. They've known the things from high impact areas, especially anyone who has data stakeholder issues. But actually rank and file employees, believe it or not, some of the most interesting members of the roundtable are people who are developers in our library system. We've had people who come in from our maintenance team, the people who literally go out and fix toilets and fix wires. They have a lot more interesting information to share than you might think. So never assume that your roundtable or whoever your think tank is should be only executives and only people who are high over particular programs, because they may be helpful, but it's better to have them as friends, not necessarily members of that roundtable. So why would you do something like that? Seems kind of silly. Well, it reduces power struggles. And another word I like to use is manic planning. Has anyone ever experienced manic planning, where you get told you get to do something, you have about 10 minutes to figure it out? I've got some hands going up. Amen, my brother. Those things happen. You'll have those situations, and you can't do it alone, no matter what you do. You can be the best PM, the best manager in the world. You need help. So if you have this, it reduces those power struggles. It also helps people who hold microphones from not being egomaniacs sometimes. Because I tell my roundtable all the time, I may have a great idea, and I may think it's great, and I'm very happy if you tell me it's a bad idea and why. That's okay, because I want it to be right. This increases that collaboration as well, because in a university environment like OU, we have over 150 individual colleges, and every one of those colleges is more or less allowed to operate kind of on their own accord, and you need people who are able to work within all of those organizations, and this roundtable approach allows that to happen. And it shows a unified front against the problem that can't be ignored. Identity management is big, and when you see a lot of people working together to make it better, such as things like ID Pro that we talked about here, we're trying to make things better in a group, that makes things a lot better. It gives you a lot more forward motion. And it offers a basis for IAM governance later. Maybe as you create your program or change it, you want to have a team that helps determine, should this be an IAM or shouldn't it, and so on and so forth. Another process or thing to talk about, that's a pitfall, is garbage processes. I kind of touched on them earlier, but now I want to go into a bit more detail about them. These are things that are built out of those identity management ecosystems. So the University of Oklahoma, our ecosystem was originally created around this thing called normalize. And it's humorous, it's called normalize, because its main focus is denormalizing data. Go figure. I guess we're a college of contradictions. But at any rate, so this normalized program, it was okay at the time it was made 30 years ago. And it was sort of okay when it was redesigned 20 years ago, but it's developed this entire ecosystem around it, and it's got all these processes that were built for the whole purpose of making normalize run and making the university run. And whenever people are so used to that environment, they don't realize if a particular way they approached it might be garbage. Maybe the situation is different and you didn't realize that, and so you have these garbage processes that are just running and running and running. And no matter how great or powerful that next generation identity management platform is, you could pick the coolest one, the most powerful with all the coolest functions, and you can have it running on a light speed, cluster of servers. But if it uses bad processes and it takes bad data, it's just going to make garbage faster. So you cannot expect that those garbage processes are going to be good. So what do you do about those? Well, seek and destroy, or seek and recycle if you want to be a little more culturally friendly there. We spent a lot of time in the identity management team documenting core identity processes. Now, full disclosure, I'm a self-professed documenting nerd, so I like doing that. And I know a lot of people go, oh, documentation, but you would be amazed at how helpful that is. And whenever I was looking at how to build this for the university, I went to every person who would let me come and talk to them. And I said, tell me about your identities. How do you get from here to there? What does that look like? What problems have you found? What are the things that keep you busy? What are the things that you wish were better? And not only do people tell you those things, but they're actually impressed that someone wants to come and ask them what's going on and how that could work. And you can say, I might be able to help you with that. Break out those flowcharts. I love Visio. I use it all the time. You can do Lucidchart if you dig that. I will be honest, I've sometimes drawn a Visio to help me make a decision about something completely non-work related. That's how much of a nerd I am, but anyway. No one else? Okay, it's just confession for me, that's all right. So you also, if you do this, you can illustrate these processes for the owners, because sometimes what you'll find is the owners may not actually know what that process looks like, or it may only be stuck in one person's brain or maybe two people's brains, and no one's ever written that down. They never thought about what it looks like. And if you're doing all these things and you find some garbage, get rid of it if you can, or recycle it. Try to make it better. This is what I call a scary diagrams in nice colors. So in this instance, after spending about a year almost doing discovery work at the University of Oklahoma, this is what I discovered was essentially how our environment worked. You know, we started over here. This is where you got student data. This is where you got employee data. Here's all the stuff that happened. Here's how we did these things. And then eventually it goes all the way through the process, out to our Active Directory, feed all these LDAP applications, fed all these cloud and SAML-based apps. This was the mothership of all of the work that we did. And in fact, I still remember one of the roundtable members when I made this diagram and I presented it to him, he emailed me back and he said, can I frame this? And I said, sure, if you want to. But anyway, it's a diagram people didn't think about. That's how the process looked. Another example of this is one that was kind of great. This was our PeopleSoft work whenever we're having a new hire. This was interesting to us because we found that the PeopleSoft team was getting data in from a PeopleSoft program called ePath, and then they were going in and hand keying it back into the identity management system. And I'm going, really? You don't see how that could be a problem? It's not surprising that one of the biggest complaints I heard is, we hate duplicate accounts. Well, if you don't have someone cross-checking all that data, you know, again, they didn't know about it because they hadn't thought about that process. So why would you do something like this? Well, if you document those processes, it'll help you find those issues, because again, these people may not have ever thought about it. They may not have looked at the processes, may not have thought of how that can be even part of the situation, but if they see it on paper and they hear you talking about it, they can go, okay, yeah, I see how that works, or man, I didn't think it looked like that. And again, these processes may have never been documented before. There's processes that I found that people are going, man, I didn't even know that people do that. Oh, well, I guess that's how that works. And then I even had some people who go, oh, that's how they did that. I always wondered. And another great thing is when you look at an identity management system is they're logic-based, right? A lot of it is building workflows, building processes. And if you have them documented, guess what? That's one less step whenever it comes time to actually make that and turn it into identity management logic. Another thing that is a problem you'll find, pitfall, is picking the wrong product. I mentioned earlier about just because you can have it and you can buy it doesn't mean you should. The best product for your organization may not necessarily be the most popular or the most chic choice, whatnot. I mean, I've seen a lot of great vendors here, and I want to tell you, every single one of those vendors down at Expo, all of them have something to offer you. And I'm not going to tell you any particular vendor that's going to be the best one or anything for you. What we found actually that worked for us was, believe it or not, the NetIQ platform. It's an older platform. But in looking at all the options and looking at all the things, it was the best platform for the university. Not a very popular platform, but for what we needed to do, it was perfect. And you need to know that. You need to pick the best product because you're going to be living with this product for the rest of your professional career, or at least the rest of your time at that particular university or organization. And another thing that I have to strongly stress, do not make an identity management program just to be a solution looking for a problem. If you go out and you buy this data, you buy this program, you spend $1 million putting this thing in, and then people go, well, that's cool. We don't do anything with it. What? So make sure that you know what the business cases are. Make sure you know what you're getting this for. What is it supposed to do? How is it going to make things better? And believe it or not, the magic quadrant is not the final answer. I'm going to pause and let everyone's heart stop beating hard for a minute. Believe it or not, at the Gartner conference, one of the Gartner conferences, they even said this themselves, is just because it's in the top right of our quadrant doesn't mean it's the best for your organization. And that's extremely true. So the way we solved this or prepared for this was we created business requirements at the university. We sit down and we talked to all of these organizations, all those data stakeholders, and we said, what do these processes look like? What do they have to do? What is this all going to be? We crafted it. Yeah, I suggest you go at least 5 business requirements, maybe a few more if you can or a few less. Use that roundtable and get those stakeholders in to determine what's really required. The more information you have, the better you're going to be. So some examples of the business requirements at OU. We created 10, and each of these business requirements had sort of some sub-requirements underneath them. We had to have one that would replace our legacy system. We need to have a secondary identity source, something that would let us do things outside of Active Directory. We had something called triangulation of trust, which I'm going to touch on here in a second. And we had some role assignment and mirroring. That was a critical thing. We also need to make sure that we can integrate with existing systems. We got a bunch. We had to make sure they all work together. We created our sixth one was auditing attestation. Auditing attestation is not as much of a big deal for a university, at least like us right now. It certainly can be in some areas, but some organizations, very critical. We also had a lot of discussions about, does the platform need to live on cloud, on premise? Can it interact with cloud and on-prem stuff the same? All these were very important. And for us in the university, we had to have an academic life cycle for this, because the way that you do a life cycle in an identity for a university is very different. We had to make sure to handle that. The university is extremely careful about how their UI, UX looks on all of their systems, and they wanted a web portal experience that was nice, seamless, easy. And the last thing was making an independent sustainment of that platform. Basically, you don't want to purchase a product and then end up marrying the person who made that product so you can keep it running. I had that happen with another company I worked with. We got a product that was what the management wanted. And it was not a bad product, but you couldn't work on it on your own. You needed a developer from that company all the time developing it. If you can afford that in your budget, great, but you may not necessarily want to do that. So I talked about them being broken down into a little bit more detail. So that triangulation of trust was one of the most interesting ones we had together. Think of it almost like step-out authentication in a way. So we have the libraries that bring in not only students for being able to get books out of there, but if you are a Norman High School student, you can bring your ID card and you can get into the library and get books. If you were part of this thing called the Pioneer Library System, which was a system of libraries in the metro area, you can bring your card to the OU library and get something. Well, the library said, we want to replicate that for digital stuff. We want to make it where if you're a student at Norman High School and you want to be able to get some sort of digital archive, digital data we have available, they want to be able to make that accessible. And right now, the only way to do it is to give them an actual account to the company and build them access and all that other stuff. It just wasn't really sustainable. So we wanted to make sure that we could successfully offer a web portal to request those secondary IDs that does not live in Active Directory. We wanted to be able to accept authentication from things like Facebook, email, SSO. Maybe we said if you wanted to give us your phone number, and as a piece of identification material, we'll give you 24-hour access to the system, and you can download one item during that 24-hour time. But if you're willing to give us your phone, maybe you're willing to give us an email address and Facebook, well, then that gives us a lot more that we know about you. We feel a lot more comfortable with you, so we can triangulate how much we can trust you, and we can give you more access. Maybe give you a week access, and you can get unlimited data, whatever you'd like to do. So we wanted to make that happen. Had to successfully federate with InCommon, big deal in the higher education world. And capable of collecting data and putting it into AD. Maybe you had a student who went to Norman High School, came to our library, and we wanted to collect that data because they decided to come and be a freshman at the university the next year. And so now we have that data. We want to have it pulled into our system. So why would you do that? Well, it creates those business requirements, helps you build that buy-in across your organization. And these business requirements can be a good deliverable. When you're building identity management, it's hard to show what you're doing and how you're accomplishing those goals. Having a business requirements document will do that for you. And if you know what you need the moment that you put these documents together, then you'll know what the vendors will be able to do for you and what they won't. And you have to be able to hold those vendors accountable for that. You can even do a mini RFP if you need to. That's what we did at the university, mini request for processes. So here's an example of our matrix that we used. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. But basically what we did is we put a business requirement here on the top. That's, for instance, our normalized replacement. And here were sort of those subgenres. And then what we did is we assigned a value of 0 does not meet, 1 meets, 2 exceeds. And exceeds was a little subjective, but it still worked. And we basically ran through and calculated it up. And NetIQ ended up being well over 30 to 40 points ahead of all the other vendors when we looked at all the options. So creating something like this is a great way to give you that. And again, it's your RFP right there. Another thing you don't want to do is be future blind. It's easy to think of this identity management as a right now, happening in the second, going to be changing later, but it is going to change all the time. Don't plan for right now. Plan for right now, for in the future, for 20 years down the line, all of that. Another thing that's critical in our world, we talked about it a lot here, is your users are going to bring their own identities. And especially in an organization like a university, they may or may not want to use the stuff you give them. We give students an OU email address. They may not want to use it. Maybe they want to use their Gmail address. Maybe they want to use their Hotmail if they've given up on life. I don't know. But, maybe they want to have that email address. Or they say, I just want to use my parents' email that they gave me. Okay, that's fine. You got to make sure your platform can handle situations like that. And if your platform cannot do both those internal things to keep your internal organization running and the external, it's going to fail because it won't be useful in the future. Design for that future. Do not limit your thoughts to just keeping the status quo. You have to prepare for what's coming. Listen for those buzzwords. Listen for Internet of Things, open identities, blockchain. All of these things are new things that are coming, and you need to be ready for it. A situation we even had is, can a user who's a contractor use our infrastructure if they're in another country? Sometimes we'll have teachers that travel to other countries to do work, and we want to make sure that they could still access all their critical resources no matter where they were. And if you don't design for the future, who knows what kind of internet access they're going to have if they're in the middle of Zimbabwe. You got to be able to give them something. So I suggest a fully integrated identity management system if you can. This was just a summary of some of the things here. We essentially have where you have internal sources feeding in, you have your cloud sources feeding in. Those go to whatever platform you've designated, and you can have on-premise things, cloud things, SSO, all of that sort of interconnected into the same environment. That's the way to get an identity management system that's going to work. So why would you do that? It's a platform. Identity management is not a program. It is not an application. It is a platform. No matter what you want to say, you can argue with me all day long. It is a platform. It is more than one thing. And you have to be able to make sure that you can handle that. And those digital natives that are coming into your organizations, they want things to be truly integrated. They want things to be as seamless as possible. The more difficult it is to do things, the less they're going to like it. And of course, one IAM to rule them all in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Number 5, requiring more resources. And you get bonus points if you said that in the Zarga Protoss terms from StarCraft. Okay, fill in the audience, all right. So too many organizations do not take the identity management program seriously. They kind of think of it as this side project, this thing that'd be kind of interesting or neat, and they don't assign the right resources. They don't assign the things you need for it. There's just not all that there. There's too few staff, and they're stretched too thin. You can't have one person who's your identity management leader who also does architecture, who also does database things. You just can't have one person do all that. You need a team that does all of that. And also, if there is no resource lines, there's no way to get the directions and the oversight. And of course, you can't get funding if you can't show what it is you need funding for. So make an actual IAM team. Dedicate a team leader too, if you can. Do not try to offer sharing of resources, and I cannot stress this enough. We have some cross-functional teams that do some things with us, but the identity management team, those guys, that is their whole responsibility. My team, who reports to me, they're identity management, and that is it. There's nothing else they're able to do at the university. Maybe a couple of answers to questions here and there, but otherwise, no, I need you focusing on that. And those cross-functional teams are going to be so helpful, not to mention your roundtable. Here's an example really quickly of the sort of the platform and how we put things together for our portfolio. The identity management side, we have our platform, we have the Active Directory, we have SSO with Ping Federate, and we have the MFA for Duo. All of that's sort of our identity management piece of that. And then the access management, we have our ClearPass network access control that we're integrating with our identity management system. We have a Cloud Lock for Cloud DLP, and we also have the federated access with things like InCommon, Shibboleth, Glue, and those kinds of things. It's kind of a portfolio. Make sure your team, if you have for identity management, has a portfolio. So why would you do that? Well, if you have overuse of your resources, it's going to cause stagnation. If you have one person trying to do 6 jobs, they're not going to have enough energy to focus on your project. Make sure that the team is allocated appropriately. I cannot tell you the number of resource constraint arguments I've gotten into because the teams are not allocated like they needed to be. And if we have a portfolio of tools that we can present from the identity management team, you can get back to that famous buzzword of the single pane of glass. All of those tools working together in some sort of harmony as best you can connect them. Lack of engagement, very important issue as well. Hold on. Engagement is extremely critical in such a big project. It can't live in a bubble. Identity management has to have the support of all the organization, all the buy-in from all of your stakeholders. If you don't engage those people, get them involved, then the program is not going to last that long. And everybody's voice needs to be heard or they won't hear yours. I have learned this so hard. I want to go out and tell them all the great things identity management could do, but if they didn't think that I heard them say they need identity management to do this thing, they're less concerned about what I'm trying to tell them. So I make sure to stress transparency in that communication. Remember, I said anyone can come to my roundtable and join me if they would like. And everyone that's listening, they'll be able to hear and know what's going on and be able to interact. And sometimes they'll take things that they heard at that roundtable meeting, take it back to their teams and to their teams and their friends and all that. And whenever you think of your organization as a whole, you have staff, visitors, contractors. You have to get all those folks engaged because all of them have a stake in that identity management platform you're building. And again, don't just ask those high-level managers. You need everybody. You need people who know what's going on, people who've been here, people who know the way that technology works. At the university, some of the things we did here, we did what we call the big show, which is where we actually called our top vendor out. And I said, tell them about identity management, not necessarily about your product specifically, but just what the product actually is and what identity management does. And I had a lot of people that came and showed up for that because they wanted to see it. And they said, wow, I didn't know that's what identity management could do. That's cool. Because some of these people may not even know what that is. And we also have what we call lovingly the IAM spam list. So as people talk to me, I say, if you want to know what's happening in identity management, let me know. Anytime there's a change or we're getting a big milestone, I send it out to the IAM communication list and those guys know what's happening. And make sure that you're prepared also to govern that process as it goes along. You're going to need someone to help you be engaged with that and invite, just keep things working where everyone is open and communicating and you can tell people what's happening. You would do this because that open communication gives everybody a voice. Everybody feels like they're being heard. And the more people that feel that their voice is heard, you're going to find an amazing amount of support. A great story. I remember I was in front of the IT council at the university where I was trying to explain to a bunch of faculty people who were very particular about IT stuff why we're doing identity management. And I remember that one of the IT council members said, well, we weren't told about this product and we don't feel comfortable moving forward. And then in the middle of that, a person who was part of their council stood up and goes, excuse me, if you don't know about identity management, it is not because of this guy's lack of trying. I am not surprised if he was not standing up on a stool in the student union going, tell me about your identity. And so then I said, hey guys, here's 2 gigs of documentation. Look at it. And this team called back and they said, we realized we were invited to those meetings and we didn't go ahead and move forward. So those people, I had a person who I didn't even know was an advocate come out of the darkness and help me there. And I also guarantee you that if one person has a concern, they're not the only one who has a concern. And it's good to hear that. Make sure you plan for your life cycle. That's the next one. It's easy to focus too much on what's happening right now and what's active, but that isn't the end. You may have other things that are ignored. You cannot treat each stage in your life cycle of an identity the same. And this is especially important for the university environment. In our mind, we had to make sure about thinking things literally from the cradle to the grave. Because in the university, that's what we dealt with. Every stage in that life cycle has its own things it needs to do, its own requirements. You got to make sure you plan for those. And then document those life cycle stages as best you can so you know what you're going into. Here's an example of a diagram we put together. This kind of shows the real full life cycle of the identity management program. You have a person who goes from a prospective student, then they go over to an admitted student, an enrolled student, and then at that point, the parent and guardian may be involved. Maybe they need to get into the bursar's office or whatnot. And those students, they may go on to become a graduate assistant or an employee or a research assistant, any of those jobs. They may move on. And furthermore, of course, you want to get them to a graduate. You want to make them graduates and get them there. And then maybe they'll become a faculty and staff for you later. Maybe after they graduate, they say, I like working for the university. I want to stay here. But also, this is the point where you include, the actual faculty and staff. Of course, you want your students to maybe become alumni because that's where the money comes from, to be honest. And whenever you bring someone as a faculty and staff, then you have to worry about dependents because that was something that you didn't think about before. And of course, you have to think about those retirees and don't forget about those guys, and even all the way down to when they pass away because there may be closing things that need to be handled. So your life cycle has to run all of that. You want to do this because it will change so many times throughout that life cycle. If you haven't prepared for each step, you're going to have some challenges. The life cycle of an academic is very different, but every one of your organizations is going to have its own unique life cycle that you guys can learn and how to figure out how to document. Another thing is don't think about just people as identities. I found out that Verizon actually considers every SIM card in their entire system an identity inside of their identity management platform. And I thought, man, I didn't even think about things like that. And you have to think about what any of those identities inside of your system could be. The last one, and this is one I added later on, was not expecting the unexpected. Kind of my own fault, mixing with the future blind. I can't predict everything, no matter how good my crystal ball is, no matter how many things that I think I've done perfectly. And what I learned is the deeper I got into building identity management and making it work is the more spaghetti I found, the more weird things that were just, you pull the drywall out and the cockroaches run, and I just had to learn about that. And there were people who are going to get really, really protective of those processes the deeper in you go. And you're going to be surprised at how quickly they argue with you about that. So you need to make sure to keep things fluid. I'm not going to take the original adage, I'm going to make it worse. It's not if or when your identity management scope is going to change, but how many times. I cannot tell you how true that is in the time we've been working here. Add fluidity to your timelines. Make sure you're able to adjust and make sure deadlines and things to work. Don't become that silly deadline that never gets reached, but make sure you're fluid about what you do. And also, you have to learn how to draw the line. Maybe pull that governance board in and go, identity management team, do we really need to do this at this point? Can we save it for a later phase? So on and so forth. And you'd be surprised at sometimes how many of those small steps are actually better than these huge strides that you see. So give you another quick snapshot. Identity management at OU about 2 years in. The timeline to release it had to be moved 4 times. I wish I was making that up, but it was. It's how it worked. There were hidden dependencies that we discovered as we were going about the process that added over 1,000 hours to our development time because it was just a matter of it was this, and it was this, and it was this. And we even had systems that were not even existing when we started this process that suddenly became critical. And we had to deal with that. And there were some systems that became obsolete in that time frame, and we just had to adjust for that accordingly. And again, those human hours cause resource constraints all over the place. So why do you want to do that? It's so large that you have to realize that scope, and you may not realize how big it is until it's too late. So plan for that. And if you have hard timelines, like I tried to do, it's going to reduce the success of your IAM deployment because I was really hard on specific timelines. And what I kind of got was this opinion of, Dave's just, he wants that done, and he's crazy. We're never going to get to that point. And then whenever we didn't hit that deadline, guess who looked like they didn't know what they were talking about? This guy. And so you have to make sure you make those timelines fluid. And sometimes these innovative things that happen may not appear until later in the process. And you might go, wow, I wish we'd have thought about it when we're developing. Well, be ready for that. But again, I cannot stress enough, you cannot build identity management alone. So the new reality of your identity management, everything is open. Open walls, open communications, open everything. You got to be prepared for that. It's coming. You saw the keynote. You know that. IAM touches everything in your organization, no matter how much you want to protect it. And it impacts everyone in your organization, no matter how much you want to protect it. And it can be the best piece of your organization or the worst. You do not want such a big and important program to be the worst thing in your organization. And it is integral to manage your risk with the organization using identity management systems and connecting those with other tools to make that all come together. So that's the end of my slideshow. I want to make sure that everyone has a chance. I don't have a lot of time to answer questions, but if you'd like to, you're welcome to. Also, here's my contact information. Because I'm in the higher ed space, I am all about collaboration. I'll be more than happy to talk to you, to give you some information. Also, if you check me out on LinkedIn, I'll post articles from time to time about identity management products and things like that. Any questions on them? No questions at all? Oh, back there. How far did I go? What? Okay, the question is, how far back did the alumni go? We went back 5 years. 5 years was the timeline that we decided, and it was going to be the most users that we could get involved with. Okay. You know, Pat, any other questions? No, what? Oh, yeah.
The transition, you probably started off with an in-house IDM solution.
We did not start out with an in-house one. We started one that was created, like it was like completely customized at the university, built for them.
My question is, for the outside world, the internet things, was that another transition you had to make? Typical transition to bolt that on to maybe the on-premise IDM?
Yes, the good news is that the university is very cloud friendly, and so it was very easy. There's, some organizations are very anti-cloud, but we actually did make sure to think about, okay, how will these cloud systems interface? Office 365. We're talking about going to Workday from PeopleSoft, and and those are things that we had to make sure to build for and to kind of consider things. But that's a great question. I know I don't have a lot of information, but yep.
Have you guys thought of implementing a message bus system?
A message bus.
Yeah, a message bus.
Have we thought about implementing a message bus system?
Integrating a message bus system, like if you for something you don't have next phone communication to the cloud.
Oh, an enterprise service bus. Yeah, actually we do. Our data warehouse team has built an ESB, and we are going to be using it later on. In the first phases, that we were focusing strictly on provisioning, but that is something that we have considered for some of our later implementations. Great question as well. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, how many directories did you integrate with, and did you do them all small bites at a time, or all one directory, then another directory, and so on?
Okay, well, the university was designed with their Active Directory was very flat, which was really useful. We have most of the accounts living in a single OU for general, and then every school had their own OU they could put inside of there. So we actually went full bore. We had no choice because there was no way we could integrate without doing it all. But what we did do limitations on is the HSC and the Tulsa offices. They have their own subsections in the domain, and they're going to be integrating at a later time because they have their current provisioning processes. But they are considering that for the future.
So did you have any other directories like mainframe or external, like universal directories that you used, or was it just AD?
Well, AD was the key to the university. We did have that there. Of course, the NetIQ product has its own e-directory that's a meta directory that we like to use there. But the only other thing we had, of course, was Azure. But Azure was directly copied out of our Active Directory, so it really wasn't that difficult in our situation. Other questions? Okay, well, I appreciate it, you guys, and I'll let you guys get out of here. Thank you.